Well, this is usually the portion of the podcast where I come up with some sort of cheeky, clever introduction. But I've been so overwhelmed by the amount of information available about this film that we're covering today that I, started to create that and I blacked out for about 7 hours and I never came up with anything. I've only come to one conclusion, though.
Yeah, what is it?
We're going to need a bigger podcast. That's right. This is Open Mic Night of the Living Dead, and we're talking about Jaws.
The creature's creeping right behind you. I hope you finally find a little slice of peace and light. 'Cause it comes crashing down tonight. Welcome to the open mic. When we call your name, you'll die. But there's no need to dread. This is the open mic night of the living dead.
You had me convinced you really weren't going to do anything.
I mean, I didn't really compared to other things.
I know, but still, that was pretty good for the numbing effect that researching this movie has on the brain.
It's true. And this is our first episode of our second year of podcasting.
Yeah, 52 weeks ago today, we released our first episode.
And if you didn't listen to last week's encore episode, we talk about that a lot. We talk about sort of how we got started and our process and everything, but that's behind us now because in front of us is the ocean.
The ocean. And I'm Rachel.
I'm John. And we live kind of near an ocean.
We do. We could be at the ocean within an hour.
Or less.
Less, yeah.
But that's not the point.
Nope.
The point is Jaws.
Yep.
A little film.
Little.
Directed by Steven Spielberg.
Mm-hmm.
So little, we are reserving the right. We've been talking about that this is going to be a 2-part episode.
Correct.
After we've both spent extensive time doing our respective portions of the research, I think we've decided there's a chance that this could be 3 episodes.
Yeah, and we're not sure right at this very moment in time if it's going to be 2 or 3. So join us and find out.
Stand by.
You're John and I'm Rachel.
You said that, yeah.
I know, but who are we? What do we do if it's their first time here?
Oh, that's a good. This is Open Mic Night of the Living Dead.
Right, exactly. You usually do that part, so I'm sorry. I was trying to segue it for you.
Yeah, we're a horror movie podcast. Sometimes I forget because, I know what's going on, but I forget that everybody else might not.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're a horror movie podcast because we're a married couple. Rachel saved me from the streets.
Something like that. That's an okay summary.
No, she saw me adrift. She saw my body washing up on shore.
Yep.
And she came up and she was like, "Breathe, damn you." And she pounded on my chest and a little bit of water rolled out of my mouth.
Gross.
And she fell in love. And ever since then, we've been married because she married me right then and there on the beach. My vow was to not drown and her vow was to not hold any of my flaws against me.
Someday I'm going to take all of your stories about how we met and put them into one big audio file.
That makes sense.
It would be pretty hilarious. I mean, I'm not going to do that. You're going to do that. I don't know how to do that.
The other part of the whole point of the show, the reason it's called Open Mic Night is because for every deep dive episode that we do, which this is one of those, we each write a brand new song inspired by it and we'll perform it for each other for the first time. It's the last segment, really, of the podcast. So it's not coming in today's episode. It may be a next episode or the one after that. We'll find out.
Right. Because we met at an open mic at the beach.
Yeah, you're ruining my story.
Shit.
But because this is a deep dive episode, what does that mean?
Means there's lots of spoilers.
That's right.
We're going to hit them right from the top.
If you somehow haven't seen Jaws yet and don't want it spoiled, give this a quick pause and go watch it. But I bet you have seen it. And if you haven't and you want to join us anyway, we welcome that as well, because by the end of all of this, I think you might want to check it out.
That is true. I do think that diving deep on these films makes them even more enjoyable in the future.
Absolutely. This movie, Jaws, should have a summary.
It should have a summary. Let me give you that summary. Here come those spoilers. A New England resort town's police chief tries to protect his beach community from a great white shark. But town leadership, worried about losing tourist dollars, pressures him to keep the beaches open. When the deaths keep coming, he heads out to sea with a marine biologist and a grizzled shark hunter to finish the job himself.
Ta-da!
That's what happens in the movie.
Well, and speaking of the movie, this movie was released on June 20th, 1975. Like I said before, it was directed by Steven Spielberg. Heard of him?
Maybe.
And it's based on the novel Jaws, which was written by Peter Benchley. And this movie was produced by Richard D. Zanuck and David Brown. Music by John Williams, but we'll get more into some of these people in the future. What's so cool about, we're going to talk about all of the things that make this movie, so first of all, so awesome, but also it's very well renowned for many aspects, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. It's widely recognized as a successful or really good film, even by folks that don't like horror.
Yeah, it's got to go on your list, right? Don't you have a letterbox list?
I do have a letterbox list of horror for horror haters, for people who say they hate horror. That, as those of us who love it know, it's deep and wide, and there's lots of different subgenres. But Jaws is kind of universal. It's become a part of the universal language of culture since 1975. Everyone knows that song. Everyone is scared of sharks at the beach, I'm assuming. We'll talk about that later too.
Well, and another reason why this movie matters is that there are only a handful of films that fundamentally changed how Hollywood operated. And this movie was one of those. It's not just simply the shark movie. And it's not just a horror movie either. It's really a horror adventure. Is that fair to say?
Adventure, drama.
Yeah, it's got great character drama, small town politics, satire, survival film. While the shark may be the icon, the people make the movie.
Yeah, there's some suspense in there.
Oh, yeah.
Mystery. Very accessible. This is when we meet people in our real lives and they find out we have a podcast. If they're part of the 50% of the world that doesn't watch horror movies, I always mention we also do movies that you might like. This is going to be one of those episodes, I think, that might hopefully allow some people to enjoy what we make.
And you kept saying Universal a couple minutes ago, which is great because the studio was Universal Pictures.
I know.
It has
No, I didn't.
Has a running time of 124 minutes and a PG rating. Bring all the children in. Gather around, children. Watch the sharks eat this drunk Captain Fisher guy. Yeah,
and a child get eaten.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. Well, and this was before there was a PG-13 rating. So it was either PG or R. So a lot of movies have these sort of weird ratings from back then. And actually, not to get sidetracked or derailed. Either one works. Side-railed sounds. So that sounds like from a movie that's rated much higher than PG. Not to get sidetracked or derailed too early on, but Steven Spielberg was largely responsible for the PG-13 rating, but that wouldn't come until the release of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and also Gremlins in like 1984, 1985. Hopefully we'll get to Gremlins eventually. We can talk a little bit more about that. The other thing I was going to say, I've mentioned that there's tons of information out there. We've done our best to get the correct information, but it might not be always. If we make a big mistake, certainly let us know in the comments. But we've done the best we can with the information available to get the best info to you.
I also did not put all of the citations in the show notes. However, there are a considerable number of them in the show notes. There's just too many, I think, for the character limit. So I didn't even try. I did put some of the more interesting ones. But if you're listening and there's a little tidbit that you want to find or you're curious about any of our sources, please feel free to reach out on social media or via email, and I will send you. I have all the links. I just did not post them.
And the reason I'm already adding that caveat is just because, like, the budget, there's different rumors, but it sounds the most repeated at least, is that the original planned budget was $3.5 to $4 million at the time, and the final production cost ballooned to $9 million. This budget increase reflected extensive delays, mechanical shark failures, difficult ocean conditions, schedule overruns, prolonged location shooting, all of which I will be getting to in the Let's Make a Movie section. In terms of box office, the lifetime worldwide theatrical grosses are generally reported between $470 to $480 million. And at the time it was released, it was easily the highest grossing movie of all time, though it would be surpassed by Star Wars not too long after all of that. Now, in terms of the summer blockbuster, the phrase first summer blockbuster is often attached to this movie. And I think that that's probably I think that that is completely fair, but there are some things to note about that. Summer hits existed before 1975. Wide releases existed. Television advertising for films like this existed. But what Jaws did extraordinarily well was combine all of these into one coordinated strategy. They had a national television advertisement campaign, a wide theatrical opening, because like back in the day, sometimes the openings took place across the country at sort of like staggered times. This had a wider theatrical opening, a summer release. There was event marketing, merchandising, exceptional word of mouth. And so basically the modern blockbuster business model grew substantially from this release.
That makes sense. And I saw that phrase a lot when I was doing research. The summer blockbuster.
Yeah, and I guess like the television, it's hard, you know, a lot of my younger movie years were the late 80s and during the 90s. So it's hard to imagine a time when there weren't like big television advertising campaigns and stuff like that.
Are there still big summer blockbusters? Or have we become too fragmented culturally for that to apply? I
mean, I think all of these, you know, the superhero movies and everything are intended to be that. I think that that's starting to drop off, though.
I mean, I don't have any sense of it because I'm only kind of tuned into the genre of movies that we're most interested in. Other ones are on my radar, but not quite as much.
Well, right. I think...
Well, I guess this year it would be Disclosure Day, right?
Speaking of Spielberg
and John Williams.
And I saw that in IMAX. Pretty good.
Right. No Jaws.
It's no Jaws. I feel like if it had come out 10 years ago, it would have blown everyone's mind. But
interesting.
Also, you don't get to the movies quite as much as I do, so I get to see like the big trailers for everything. I mean, this year you've got The Odyssey coming out in like a week from when we're recording this.
Yep.
And He-Man had a lot of big advertising, stuff like that. But in terms of Jaws, Universal Studios committed an unprecedented advertising budget to television before release. Instead of relying primarily on newspaper reviews or gradual expansion, the studio saturated television with memorable commercials featuring, of course, John Williams music, swimmers, underwater point of view shots, panic on the beaches. Basically, the campaign convinced audiences that Jaws was not simply another movie, that it was an event. So that was kind of the turn for the way a movie was advertised.
That's really interesting.
And it's hard for me to imagine it
any other way.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we grew up in the 80s and 90s, so it was everywhere.
It's kind of like when we talk about like trying to imagine seeing Psycho when it came out.
Right. There is something about the time when a movie comes out that affects it that you just can never capture going back and watching it later. But I guess that's a little bit of what we try to do when we research these movies quite this deeply.
The audience response exceeded virtually every expectation. Long lines formed around theaters. Repeat viewings became common. Of course, this was back before you could rent movies. So people, you know, if you liked a movie, you got to go see it again. Although eventually TV broadcast was becoming more popular here and just became a cultural phenomenon rather than simply a successful film. Others saw the movie for the first time when it did come to TV broadcast, which is also interesting because they saw the pan and scan. Have we talked about pan and scan? Do you know what that is?
Nope.
Basically, obviously movies like this shot in widescreen, right? For the movie theater screen, TV screen back in the day was the square, the standard. I should be giving you like aspect ratios right now, but my brain is so dead.
Square and rectangular are fine.
Square and rectangular are fine. Interestingly, square's a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square.
I know that. You're making it more complicated than it needs to be. Will you finish telling me about whatever it is you're telling me about?
So a lot of movies that were shot, you couldn't always just like cut off the edges, because sometimes you would miss something that was in the frame that's important to the movie.
Right.
So a lot of times there would be what was called pan and scan, where the shot, what might be like generally a static shot, kind of would scan across to catch whatever was supposed to be shown or what was important to that scene. So sometimes that like changes the meaning and the intent of the director. So a lot of people didn't see really the real Jaws until like DVDs came out.
Oh, interesting.
If you think of it that way. And of course, the audience was not the only people. We're not the only people who liked this movie. The Academy Awards loved it. It won Best Film Editing for Verna Fields, Best Original Dramatic Score, John Williams, and Best Sound Design. Our cat loves sound design.
She just kicked herself in the face. She's scratching her ear, and she went so hard she meowed.
It was also nominated for Best Picture, but lost out to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
I haven't seen that in years. I feel like that's worth a rewatch.
Yeah, definitely. It's got a lot of people we like in it. Mm-hmm. Notably, though, Spielberg himself was not nominated for Best Director and admitted later on that the omission was personally painful because he believed the production had demanded everything he had as a filmmaker. I think, now the time has passed. He's gotten a lot of acclaim. I'm sure he's probably not losing much sleep over that now. And overall, the critics loved it. I really just put on a bunch of like A+, great job reviews here.
Yeah.
Roger Ebert, Rachel's favorite.
That guy.
From the Chicago Sun-Times. Awarded the film 4 out of 4 stars, he immediately recognized that Spielberg's greatest accomplishment was making the audience emotionally invest in the people before asking us to fear for them, which, as we've talked about, is
what every good horror movie does.
Exactly. Nice work, Spielberg.
Ebert, even a broken clock is right twice a day.
That's right. I think he probably did. We give him a lot of slack? No.
Flack. The opposite.
My brain is not good today.
That's okay.
We give him a lot of flack, but it's mostly because he hated a lot of horror movies that we really like that probably at the time we would have been made fun of for liking. So, oh well. But in terms of Jaws, he wrote Jaws is a sensationally effective action picture, a scary thriller that works all the better because it is populated with characters that have been developed into human beings. It's a film that's as frightening as The Exorcist, and yet it's a nicer kind of fright. Somehow more fun because we're being scared by an outdoor adventure saga instead of a brimstone and vomit devil. So.
Okay.
And Pauline Kael for The New Yorker, she described Jaws, it may be the most cheerfully perverse scare movie ever made.
Huh.
She also observed the disasters don't come on schedule the way they do in most disaster pictures, and your guts never settle down to a timetable. And she also praised Spielberg's filmmaking energy. But I thought that was pretty cool. She understood that Spielberg was constantly disrupting the audience expectations, and every time that you think you've learned the rhythm of the movie, it sort of gets flipped on its head a little bit.
Did these critics consider Jaws a horror movie, or... I may not know. I just am curious if they, was it marketed as a horror movie? It's a creature feature, right? Like a monster movie almost.
Ebert compared it to The Exorcist.
Right.
But yeah, I think some people who really liked it may have avoided using the term horror.
That's what I'm thinking. I don't think, and even I don't really immediately think of Jaws as horror, but it certainly is. It does all the same stuff.
It's a daytime horror largely,
Yeah.
which kind of changes it in your mind, I feel like.
You're right on. Exactly.
Vincent Canby for the New York Times can be a good critic. Sometimes he cannot be. I don't know. I don't know the guy.
That's good, though.
He wrote that Jaws is a great adventure movie of the kind we don't get very often anymore. It's clean-cut adventure without the gratuitous violence of so many action pictures. I don't know what he's talking about in 75. It has the necessary amount of blood and guts to work, but none extra. And it's one hell of a good story, brilliantly told. And talking about the cast, he said they have to work very hard just to appear alive, and Mr. Scheider, Mr. Shaw, and Mr. Dreyfuss come across with wit and easy self-assurance. A.D. Murphy, for Variety, wrote, the fast-moving 124-minute film engenders enormous suspense as the shark attacks a succession of people. The creature is not even seen for about 82 minutes, and a subjective camera technique makes his earlier forays excruciatingly terrifying all the more for the invisibility. And he also called Shaw's performance absolutely magnificent.
All good points.
I've got a few more, but I liked this one little negative one, and then I'll end it on that. Charles Champlin, not to be confused with Charlie Chaplin, his reviews are always very quiet. Charles Champlin for the LA Times wrote, Jaws is too gruesome for children. It is a coarse-grained and exploitative work which depends on excess for its impact. Ashore it is a bore, awkwardly staged and lumpily written. You're lumpily written, Charles Champlin.
Yeah, but the phrase lumpily written is pretty great.
Yes.
Very evocative.
But I wouldn't apply it to this.
I wouldn't at all, but I like the phrase.
And what was interesting, too, about these reactions to this movie is that it was pretty well known already before it came out, all the challenges that they had making it. And instead of focusing on that, like none of those mention really a shark, right?
Right.
So it's neat. I don't know. The movie already started out bigger than intended, I think, which is great.
Yeah, it's reflected in the ratings, too, which I noted here, but IMDb's got an 8.1, which is super duper high. On Rotten Tomatoes, same deal, 97% tomato meter, 98% popcorn meter, which is super duper high. Letterboxd, it's a 4.0. My personal score for this, when we watched it a couple years ago, was a 4.5. This time around, I have recalibrated my scale, and I think it's a 4. And not because we talked about this a little bit when we watched it, but I think because personal response and enjoyment is a part of my rating scale, and I think I have to be in the right mood for Jaws, which knocks it down from a 4.5. Whereas like The Thing, I'm not sure that there is a mood that I would have to be in. I think I would always enjoy, like that's a 4.5 for me. But there's also movies that are 5s that no one else would rate a 5 because I love them so much, right? So I think personal response, and I'll talk more later why I think this is not one of my favorite movies, but it's still a 4, which is still pretty high. What is your personal rating?
After much deliberation, I think that this is the most perfect film we've covered.
Okay.
That doesn't necessarily mean it's my favorite. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the one that I'm going to watch all the time. But I mean, if somebody was like, do you want to watch Jaws? I'd be like, yeah, I'll watch Jaws for sure. I mean, it's one of my favorites.
Yep.
And so putting that, I gave Rosemary's Baby a 9.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as perfect of a film as Jaws. I don't know whether I like Rosemary's Baby slightly more or whether I like Jaws slightly more. So, but based on that, I had to give Jaws a 9.5.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. And I gave Rosemary's Baby a 4.5 because I'm not sure I'm willing to say if either one is better. They're both doing really different things and they're really different productions. And there's just a lot of differences between them. But I think I do enjoy Rosemary's Baby more. And it comes down to the fact that it's the ocean, but we'll talk about that later. I just don't like the ocean. However, for our Open Mic Night of the Living Dead rating scale,
which is
1 is absolute trash, don't bother. 2 is pretty much everything that we watch. It's good to great. And then 3 is amazing. You should watch this. It's so important to the genre and to film and art in general. And we've had a few 3s up until now, and I think Jaws is 100% a 3 on that scale. Like, it is a lower personal rating for me just because of how it's not consistent for me, my enjoyment of it. But it is a 3 for sure. This is cream of the crop, top of the list, worth watching.
Yeah, definitely a 3 in my book as well. So go see it if you haven't.
Although you did take our 14-year-old to see it when she was 13.
Yes.
Yeah,
because last summer was the 50th anniversary, and they re-released it into theaters, and we saw it in 3D, which was kind of neat.
That is kind of neat. It wasn't the 3D one.
No, they took the original and made the original 3D, which I didn't know you could do that, but you can, apparently. Well, especially when you have somebody who shoots with such depth and blocking and stuff as Spielberg. I kind of like what we did here. We skipped a section, but I think that the ratings go better there where we had them, where you just did them. I just wanted to mention, if you were going to go to the theaters in 1975, what you might see. I mean, the horror landscape in 1975 was certainly kind of at a crossroads. Traditional supernatural and occult horror remained popular, but the genre was increasingly moving toward contemporary settings, bodily infection, thank you, Cronenberg, and transformation, realistic violence, social and political anxiety, and threats emerging from ordinary environments. So obviously Jaws falls into that. The monster in Jaws was not supernatural, demonic, prehistoric, created in a lab. The shark was a real animal placed into a heightened but recognizable situation. Kind of gives Jaws almost a documentary-like plausibility that separated it from earlier creature features. And the movie also helped demonstrate that a horror premise could be mounted as prestigious studio filmmaking, large-scale adventure, and mainstream event entertainment. Now, if you were going out to the movies in 1975, what a great year you'd be having. First of all, Deep Red by Dario Argento.
I like that one.
Yeah, a lot of people consider that to be really his top giallo film. Also, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which eventually became the midnight movie cult picture. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah, I went in high school down in, where did they have it, in Cambridge?
You're asking me?
You went to school in Massachusetts.
But you're saying
I was in high school, so you were still a few years away from being in Mass. But they had a midnight showing, and everyone was in costume, and I was like a senior in high school, and we went and saw it.
I've never seen it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And The Stepford Wives, which we mentioned during our Rosemary's Baby episode. Speak of the devil.
Shut up.
Speak of the devil, there was a movie called Race with the Devil that sounds pretty cool. It's like a road thriller involving vacationers, a satanic cult, and escalating pursuit.
It's all about those cults in the 70s.
And then The Devil's Reign was an occult horror featuring Ernest Borgnine, William Shatner, and Ida Lupino. And a TV anthology called Trilogy of Terror that starred Karen Black. I think she was in Slumber Party Massacre. It was not a theatrical release, but an important 1975 horror event. And then a movie called Bug, which was a nature horror film involving fire-starting subterranean insects.
Okay.
In terms of the non-horror movies, like I mentioned before, the big one was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which won the 5 major Academy Awards: Best Picture, Director, Actor, Actress, and Screenplay. But along with that was Dog Day Afternoon, which I love. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it. It was filmed in the neighborhood where I briefly lived in Brooklyn, New York for 2 years. It was filmed in my neighborhood, so I enjoy watching it, imagining being there in 1975. Also, Kubrick's Barry Lyndon was in 1975. Nashville, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, The Man Who Would Be King, 3 Days of the Condor, The Return of the Pink Panther, and Love and Death, which was a Woody Allen film. So I just feel like all these years I have so many good movies. Maybe just movies are awesome.
I think that's probably it, is that there's just so many good movies.
Okay.
All right. Well, we've made it through our introduction.
Yeah.
Shall we make a movie?
Let's make a movie.
Let's make a movie. We'll make sure that it's spooky. that's groovy. Let's make a movie.
All right.
Okie dokie.
Let's make a movie.
Let's do it.
We're going to talk about some people here, as I do. I'm going to start with Peter Benchley, actually. The gentleman who wrote the book and then one of the credited screenwriters, I should say, for this film. He was born in May of 1940 in New York City. He comes from a family of writers. So he was the kind of person, if you ran into him and you'd ask him what he did for a living, he'd tell you that he was a writer, and he, just like his father and his father before him, he was like one of the kind of those people. His grandfather was Robert Benchley, a celebrated humorist, critic, actor, and member of the Algonquin Round Table. His father, Nathaniel Benchley, was a novelist, journalist, and children's author. Benchley attended high school at Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire and later attended Harvard University, so he spent some time in our neck of the woods. And before becoming a novelist, his work included journalism, magazine writing, television writing, and speech writing, where he worked for a while in the administration of President Lyndon B. Johnson. And of course, the career background is useful because the novel's amity politics involve publicity, economic pressure, public messaging, officials trying to manage a dangerous story. So he was up to the task. He had a lot of these ideas in his brain. He understood how institutions shape information and how political language can be used to soften or conceal a crisis. In terms of the origins of his novel, and, you know, we could do a whole episode comparing the novel to the movie. I don't know if you have any of that.
I did. I read an article. So Audible actually put out a blog post a couple years ago about the differences between the book and the film. And they had a lot of really interesting information about it. So that is linked in the show notes if you would like to dive deeper.
Yeah, because I had a whole section and I just cut it out.
Yeah.
But his central inspiration was not one single historical shark attack. A major spark came from newspaper stories about unusually large sharks caught off the northeastern United States. And he became fascinated by the fictional possibility of one large shark entering a resort community's waters, threatening the town's entire summer economy. So the premise depends on two pressures sort of operating at once: the physical danger of the shark and the economic danger of closing the beaches, which we still see today. I'm not even sure what the threat was, but
yes,
right around the 4th of July in Massachusetts, there was somebody, like a political leader, being like, the beaches are safe, you can go to the beach.
I think there's been a lot of bacteria in the water this year in a lot of places in New England.
Yeah, so I think that it was funny because somebody on Instagram or something had put a video up that was like intercuts between the mayor in this movie and whoever that person was, and just like the parallels between their language about the safety of the beach.
Yeah, it was really good. You sent that to me.
And have you ever heard of Frank Mundus?
I have. I read a whole article about him.
Well, what briefly can you tell me? Why am I mentioning him?
Because Frank Mundus has been thought to be the inspiration for the shark hunting.
Quint?
Yep, I was saying it in my head and I couldn't make it come out of my mouth. I kept wanting to say Quinn or Clint, but it's Quint. He was the inspiration. Benchley says no, but Benchley interviewed him, like spent time with him, and he even had a habit, they said, of scratching his nails on chalkboard, which is something that Quint does in the movie. So even though Benchley denied it to the end, there's a really cool article that I also did link in the show notes about Mundus and how he was the inspiration. And always would say he was. And he was part of the catching the biggest great white shark that was ever caught, like 5 years after the movie came out.
Oh.
So yeah, he was a really eccentric fellow that hunted sharks and did a lot of really bombastic things and had this reputation in New York for killing sharks.
And in terms of bad habits, scratching your nails down a chalkboard, that's going to be one of the tops. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that they don't have chalkboards really anymore.
Yeah.
People like this guy.
Seriously.
So obviously, Benchley's novel relies on the then popular theory of a rogue animal, an individual predator that develops a pattern of deliberately attacking humans. I think most of us know that now, like modern shark researchers generally reject the idea that great white sharks become intentional serial hunters of people in the way that this story imagines, but that doesn't weaken the premise as fiction. But I guess, it's important when we're discussing the film's effect on public understanding of sharks. In terms of writing Jaws, it was his first novel. Nice work, Pete. It was published in 1974, became an immediate commercial phenomenon. By the end of 1974, it had spent 42 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. By the following summer, more than 5.5 million copies were reportedly in print. The film rights were acquired before the book's full commercial impact was even known because the producers, Zanuck and Brown, recognized that the basic premise was extraordinarily cinematic. And then shifting from the novel to Benchley's screenplay work, he wrote early screenplay drafts, and the eventual credited screenplay was by Peter Benchley and Carl Gottlieb. Benchley's drafts retained more material and tone from the novel, but as development continued, the screenplay moved away from several of the book's subplots and toward the shark, Brody's conflict with the town, the three-man hunt, and cleaner suspense mechanics. And I think they also really revamped the final act and sort of the climax of the movie. He eventually remained important to the film, but the finished screenplay was the result of extensive revision by multiple hands, even like on a day-to-day basis by Gottlieb. Benchley's in a cameo in the movie.
I had that in cast.
Oh.
But that's okay.
I'm so embarrassed.
There's so many buckets that these things can go under. So it's like, it's fine as long as we get it out there.
He was the television reporter covering the shark story, which is kind of funny because the author who created Amity's Panic becomes part of the fictional media response to that panic.
That's my mind being blown.
In terms of his reaction to the final film, he did not agree with every adaptation choice. The compressed air tanks exploding, he thought that was too sensational. But at the end of the day, Benchley remained publicly associated with the film and generally acknowledged its extraordinary effectiveness and success. His widow, Wendy, later said that he was pleased with Spielberg's adaptation. However, Wendy, Benchley, and marine scientists have noted that Peter frequently said he could not write the same novel later in life because sharks had become the victims of human activity rather than believable villains. And he himself, later in life, became involved in ocean education, shark protection, marine conservation advocacy, and documents in nonfiction writing about the sea. So he really kind of spent the rest of his life, in a sense, protecting the creatures that he villainized.
Yeah, and that's because it had such a big effect on the public's perception of sharks, which I don't think he intended at the start, but was the final result.
And here, Stephen King hasn't spent a goddamn minute doing anything to protect the reputation of clowns. Sorry, that always gets me worked up.
It sure does.
Somebody who we could spend a podcast series on, which we will not do, is Senor Steven Spielberg. He's directed a bajillion movies. You've seen him. You loved him. He was born in December 1946 in Cincinnati, Ohio, grew up primarily in Arizona and later California. And from childhood, he was fascinated by cameras, spectacle, suspense, fantasy, and staging stories visually. I have not yet seen Meet the Fabelmans, but it is near the top of my list. I think it's streaming somewhere right now. I'm going to watch it. It came out a couple of years ago. I think it's a lot about a child falling in love with filmmaking, if I understand correctly. But even as a young kid, he was making short amateur films using an 8mm camera and putting family members and friends in as the cast, using household location and homemade effects.
Awesome.
Just like my sweet, sweet sandwich video from Halloween last year. If you haven't checked that out, go check out our YouTube page.
It's John's first step on becoming the next Spielberg.
14-year-old said that I didn't cut enough or that it moved too slowly, but she doesn't appreciate a good slow burn or a turkey sandwich. She doesn't like deli meat, so get off your high horse, critic. We should call her Rogerta Ebert.
She wouldn't even know what that meant.
Mostly because did you notice today I didn't say Roger Ebert?
I did notice that.
Every day when I wake up now,
Shut up.
I spend 2 minutes, only 2 minutes. 2 minutes a day can take the Roger away, is how I look at it. So there's something called the Universal Lot story, or at least that's what I'm calling it. Spielberg has had an early association with Universal Studios, which has really become a part of Hollywood folklore. He visited the studio as a teenager and later returned repeatedly, learning the geography and culture of the lot. Some retellings sometimes make it sound as if he simply sneaked in, claimed an office, and was immediately permitted to direct. The reality was certainly less magical and more gradual, but all of these visits and his deep interest, through all of that, he made a lot of contacts, was able to show some of his early work. He developed relationships and eventually received professional opportunities kind of through this persistence and his passion. He had a short film called Amblin, which became a key calling card for him in his early days. And it led to a professional directing contract at Universal and later became the name of Amblin Entertainment, which you'll see at the start of a lot of his films.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
And I have not seen Amblin. I wonder if it's available. I'm not sure. He really started in television. He developed his craft directing episodic television, including on shows like Night Gallery, Marcus Welby, MD, Columbo. You saw that, right?
I did, and I was waiting for a good opportunity to mention it. A few years ago, watched the show Poker Face, which is a police-ish, detective-y procedural one which is kind of inspired by Columbo. So I was like, I'll go watch the old Columbos. And the very first episode of Columbo was directed by Steven Spielberg. And it's a great episode. So, trivia bit.
And all of this work on television taught him speed, economy, coverage, and visual problem solving, and how to deliver suspense on schedule. But this last skill would be tested to the max, nearly to the breaking point, by the production in Jaws. Duel was a film he directed, but it was originally produced for television in 1971. It's a story that follows an ordinary motorist pursued by a nearly anonymous truck driver. I've heard good things about it. I've not seen it.
Me either.
I don't see it out there streaming a lot, but maybe next time it is, we'll watch it. Because it's really an obvious precursor to Jaws. There's the ordinary protagonist, relentless predator, the threat that's partly concealed, suspense based on movement and point of view. And this demonstrated that Spielberg could create sustained tension without elaborate exposition. Next would be The Sugarland Express, which was his first theatrical release. It was produced by Zanuck and Brown like Jaws would be. It came out in 1974. It was not a major commercial hit, but it was praised for its visual confidence.
Yeah, I haven't seen many of his earlier ones. I've seen like the big ones that were big when we were kids.
Yeah. And I'm not planning to go through those.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of going to what brought him to Jaws.
Oh, yeah.
But the producer's experience with Spielberg on Sugarland Express helped position him for Jaws when that became available. He became involved with Jaws because he was connected now to Zanuck and Brown, the producers. And he initially responded to the material because it reminded him of Duel. He later joked that he saw the two stories as the same basic premise, but one on land and one in water. That's not a completely fair comparison because Jaws had a lot more depth. It had all the town politics and the family life and the maritime adventure. And so Jaws obviously is much larger production, larger than I even realized before we got into this whole mess. He did not necessarily see Jaws as the defining opportunity of his life. He reportedly worried that directing another story about a relentless predator could typecast him as the truck and shark director. But I think he eased his way out of that.
Yeah, I think he's all right.
He was 27 during the principal photography of Jaws. It's important, but it should not be framed as though he was an untested amateur. He was young for the scale of the assignment, but he was already extremely experienced and professional director by that time. But can you imagine?
At 27?
Yeah.
Nope.
What were you doing at 27? Maybe you shouldn't say it on the podcast.
I was in seminary. I was in graduate school taking classes about films and theology and things like this. But I certainly was not responsible for $1 million of budgets and robot sharks and famous people.
That's too bad.
Seminary's not quite as glamorous.
I was a math tutor in Maine when I was 27, I think, if I'm mathing correctly.
Nice. That's funny.
So Spielberg approached Jaws as more than horror, obviously, because the outcome, obviously, like you were saying earlier, is more than horror. And one of his big decisions, for better or worse, was that he had to shoot this on the ocean. It was one of his defining decisions of pre-production, was to shoot the Orca material, Orca being the boat that they're on, if you missed that, on the real Atlantic, rather than primarily in a controlled tank.
And I'm wondering now, like, how many times he regretted that decision during production, but then also, would the movie be what it was if it hadn't gone through all the production troubles? Probably not.
No, definitely. Because a lot of movies like this, they would shoot in a controlled tank on a studio lot. But he really wanted a real horizon, naturalistic water, authentic boat movement, and no visible land in the background. And so it gives the movie just extraordinary visual realism. But it also led to all the delays, mechanical failures, drifting boats, changing weather, unusable sound, continuity problems, rising costs. And he later described the production as a living nightmare. In addition to Peter Benchley as a screenwriter, the producers and Spielberg felt that Peter Benchley's screenplay still needed greater cinematic momentum. You know, it was still kind of novelistic, more sympathetic characters, less subplot, more humor, stronger final act. So Howard Sackler, Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright, best known for his work The Great White Hope, performed important uncredited rewriting. And then Carl Gottlieb later recalled that Spielberg sent him Sackler's rewrite and that it improved the novel in some respects while remaining deficient in others. But Sackler's known for strengthening Quint, developing the USS Indianapolis monologue, giving the screenplay a more serious dramatic foundation. But who's Carl Gottlieb? He was initially involved partly as an actor. I'm not sure if you have some of that in your cast stuff.
Just who he played.
So I'll leave you to that. But Spielberg also wanted Gottlieb involved because of his background in comedy, improv, naturalistic dialogue, and television writing. Gottlieb recalled that Spielberg wanted him present to help improvise humor and add naturalistic dialogue and work with the local non-professional performers and revise the screenplay during production, which again, they did quite frequently. He had written for television comedy, including the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. There were really a lot of great humor moments in this that I think were absent before his contributions. And during the production, Gottlieb became the principal on-location writer. I mean, I think that this happens in a lot of movie productions, but not necessarily to the extent that it did in this movie. The screenplay was not treated as a fixed document. And Gottlieb later wrote a book called The Jaws Log, and it became one of the definitive firsthand accounts of this process. And I think is really highly regarded for huge Jaws fans in terms of its everything it's got.
Yeah.
The You're Gonna Need a Bigger Boat line. It's famous, widely credited to Roy Scheider as an improv, which it kind of was, but it actually grew out of a recurring production joke about the filmmaker's inadequate support barge and equipment needs. So Scheider used variations of the line during filming. So it was really actually an inside joke on the production and not necessarily an immediate reaction to what was taking place.
Cool.
The other important writer, the last one that I'll mention, was John Milius, also uncredited, but he contributed largely to the evolution of Quint's Indianapolis speech. Very important. And I guess he did a lot of this kind of work, would help with monologues and stuff like this in works.
And Robert Shaw himself, who played Quint, was also a playwright, and he worked on that speech as well.
Yeah, I think from what I understood, Shaw reshaped it, like gave it its last little...
I don't know what sound that was.
Well, we'll find out.
For filmmakers, I know we're going to talk about specific folks at later sections, but I was wondering if you were going to bring up Verna Fields, who was the editor.
I was just going to say that I wish I had gotten more on Verna Fields because obviously she won the Academy Award, so I'm glad you're bringing her up.
Yeah, I really liked her nickname. It was Mother Cutter. And that she had almost nothing to cut with. And
like
I did
no knife?
Yes. Spielberg said, we would shoot 5 scenes in a good day, 3 in an average day, and none in a bad day because things took so long. And the other thing I saw about her was that she was known to reshape scenes that Spielberg had shot for comedy into terror and vice versa.
Huh.
So, and that's really interesting. There's so many documentaries and books and websites and articles about this movie that any of these things you want to know more about, you could find it.
Yeah.
Easy peasy.
I've only seen good things about her work on this, though. Like she often gets credited for, really contributing to the final product.
Totally. Yeah, that's what I saw too. But everyone else I had written down here will have their spot later.
Well, that's all I've got for now. I'm going to go more into the actual production in a bit, but why don't you give me the cast?
Sure. So we've got Roy Scheider as Chief Martin Brody. He pitched himself for the role. He was at a party. Spielberg was complaining about casting troubles for the role, and Scheider said, well, what about me? And Spielberg was like, what about you? I'll tell you who else was considered for the role when we talk about the character of the sheriff later. But Roy Scheider, very well known. He broke into film in the early 70s. He was in Clute and The French Connection in 1971. He went on to be on a whole bunch of stuff, including All That Jazz, where he got another Oscar nomination, Marathon Man, Sorcerer, Blue Thunder, and he was also on Sequest DSV, which is where I knew him from before Jaws, was the captain from Sequest. Did you watch Sequest?
I don't think so.
I definitely did. He died in 2008 from complications of multiple myeloma, unfortunately. But yes, he was known to have ad-libbed the "you're gonna need a bigger boat," the inside joke that you referenced earlier. That was the other big contribution. But he was all in. He didn't even see a script before he agreed to be in the movie. He just wanted to help out Spielberg. Robert Shaw, who plays Quint, really famous, has been in a lot of movies. He was cast after a few other actors both turned the role down. The role took 6 months to cast. And he was suggested, I think you mentioned this already, by Zanuck and Brown, the producers, because he was in The Sting, and they had worked with him on that. And so they suggested him. He was, as I mentioned, a trained playwright, in addition to being an actor. And so, again, the USS Indianapolis speech, he and Richard Dreyfuss, Dreyfuss, are you nodding at me?
Yep, Dreyfuss is how I know it.
Great. Well, I've heard both. I'm going to go with that. So we're consistent. Anyway, but he and Richard Dreyfuss reportedly had actual real life beef. They feuded on set, and Shaw viewed him as a green Broadway obsessed punk, which makes sense for how Quint saw Hooper as well. But supposedly by the end of production, they were okay, but they did have some struggles. Shaw was also an alcoholic. He battled alcoholism, and he left for Canada between shoots over tax issues. So it sounds like he had a pretty chaotic personal life. He died of a heart attack in 1978, only 3 years after the film's release. And one of the stories about Robert Shaw there's so many stories, but that he was originally too drunk to give the USS Indianapolis speech, that he had convinced Spielberg to let him actually drink, and he blacked out. And then he called Spielberg at 2 a.m. that night, couldn't remember what happened. He was like, did I screw it up? Please let me try it again. And the next morning he gave that unbelievable, incredible speech that we all know and is just an incredible moment of film.
And I think that and maybe it's just rumors, but I think that there's some from both. Because there's times when he's super glassy-eyed and other moments when not so much, but who knows?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't dive too deeply. Richard Dreyfuss plays Matt Hooper, the marine biologist. There was always kids that wanted to be marine biologists when they grew up, right? I was not one of them. But there was always someone who wanted to be a marine biologist. How do people know what those were? Was it because of this role? I was just thinking that as I was going through.
Maybe. Not to bring more Spielberg into this, but I thought being an archaeologist would be pretty cool because of Indiana Jones.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely glamorizes the role. But I was just, maybe if that's when it entered the cultural zeitgeist, was when we've got this marine biologist on board. Dreyfuss was Spielberg's first choice for Hooper. He was coming off of American Graffiti in 1973. He also, I read, and I didn't write this down in this part here, but that he turned down the role at first, but then saw himself in a movie that he wasn't happy in and then accepted the role afterwards. So Dreyfuss won the Best Actor Oscar in 1977 for The Goodbye Girl. At that time, he was the youngest actor to ever win it. He's also been in movies like Close Encounters, Mr. Holland's Opus, which was a favorite of mine, and Stand By Me. And as of 2025, he was the only principal cast member still living. So he was there for the 50th anniversary. And he's so young in this movie. Pretty cool to... I think I knew him probably the most from Mr. Holland's Opus, being a band kid. Watched that movie a lot, I feel like. So seeing him as a young person is kind of cool.
I'm just trying to remember what I knew him from the best. I feel like there was a movie that I watched a lot that had him in it, and I'm blanking on it. I'll figure it out.
You'll get there. We've got Lorraine Gary, who played Ellen Brody. She was the wife of Universal president Sidney Sheinberg. Didn't know that. And she was one of the first 2 actors cast in the film. She also appeared in both sequels and retired from acting after Jaws: The Revenge. So she was also the only one who ended up in the sequels, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, even they kind of pulled a Vacation thing where the kids were different in every movie.
That's right. Murray Hamilton played Mayor... sorry.
Scheider's in the second one, too.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, I replaced 2 with 3 maybe in my head.
That's okay.
It's been a while since we watched the second one. Maybe we'll spin it on the sequel.
He's definitely in it.
Murray Hamilton played Mayor Larry Vaughn. Veteran character actor. He was in The Graduate, The Hustler, and Anatomy of a Murder. Oh, he was also in Jaws 2. Died of lung cancer in 1986 before he could film Jaws: The Revenge.
He was also in Amityville Horror, the original.
Oh, I don't know if I've seen that. Have I? Did we watch that together?
Nope.
Cool. He played a great mayor, great politician, representative of that kind of person, which we'll talk more about in themes later on. Carl Gottlieb, who played Harry Meadows, the newspaper editor, was the film's primary screenwriter, as you already mentioned. And he cast himself after Spielberg asked him to punch up the script and pick a part he'd want to play, which is kind of cool to just get your own role.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Jeffrey Kramer played Deputy Hendricks. He was a Martha's Vineyard area casting find. It was only his second acting credit. He moved into TV producing after Jaws 2 and worked on Ally McBeal and The Practice. Susan Back-Linney played Chrissy Watkins, the opening victim. She's really cool. She's a stunt woman.
Oh.
And she was a former competitive swimmer, also a Weeki-Wachi mermaid performer, which I don't know what that is, but I am curious. But she was hired specifically because she could, 1, swim really well, and 2, was willing to work nude in the ocean at night.
They didn't call me.
Fair. And the way she pitched herself to Spielberg, she pointed out a professional could do the close-ups without hiding her face. So she was able to act while doing the stunt instead of having to split it up. Spielberg has called her scene one of the most dangerous stunts he's ever directed. I'll talk about that more in special effects.
Nice.
But her scene in the beginning of the movie, iconic, seriously iconic. So she passed away in 2024, but was going to cons and stuff. So there's some really cool interviews with her out there. Peter Benchley, the novel's author, was the TV reporter, which I didn't know at the time. Chris Ribello played Michael Brody, the older Brody son. I don't have much about him other than that he died really young at age 37. And that was it for cast. I have plenty to talk about the characters, but really strong cast. But I think the overarching thing is that Spielberg did not want famous actors for his cast. He wanted people that looked like ordinary people. And so I thought I had more notes, about some of the other casting choices that he wanted.
Yeah, because you mentioned said you were going to say Like,
I did, because I thought I had them with the characters, but I'm not finding them. Maybe they'll show up somewhere else. Maybe I read and I didn't write them down. But for example, so Charlton Heston wanted a role in the movie, but he was too famous. I think he wanted Quint. And I wish I had written that. Oh, wait, here, found it. I was in production. That's not the right place. Spielberg wanted Robert Duvall to play Brody. Charlton Heston wanted Brody, but Spielberg thought his screen persona was too grand.
yeah.
That he was and broke his.
You damn dirty sharks.
So he picked people that looked normal, and gosh, that made a big difference, right? Like, there's no dreamboats here. Like, none of them are like super stud movie stars. Although Robert Shaw was quite handsome when he was younger and played some heartthrobs, I suppose. But I think that overall the casting was a really intentional choice by Spielberg that makes this movie so special.
I think the movie that I remember Dreyfuss from the most from my younger years is What About Bob? I went to look through here. You know that movie, right?
I don't know.
It takes place on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire with Bill Murray, and is hypochondriac. Where you're like really germophobic, maybe just OCD.
Hypochondriac.
Dreyfuss plays his therapist who goes on vacation, and Murray's character is really nervous about it because Murray doesn't want to be left alone in the city without his therapist or psychologist nearby. So he ventures out to the lake to find Dreyfuss.
That's amazing.
I'm surprised we've never watched it. There's a lot of things to like about it. The other thing I noticed when I was looking for that is that Richard Dreyfuss has an uncredited role in The Sentinel, which is a movie we keep talking about.
Everybody was in that freaking movie.
Yeah.
I didn't realize he was in that.
No, it's uncredited. He was a man on Sidewalk. So you got to be watching The Sidewalk, which we weren't watching the first time because there are already too many other people we know directly in the middle of the frame. But
you want to dig into production a little bit?
Yeah, maybe we'll start this part and see how far we get along. And if it's going too long, we'll split it up into the next episode.
Cool. I think we can do it. No, you're looking at me with like you don't see my notes.
All right. Principal photography took place primarily on and around Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. I've never been there, but you have?
No, my family goes sometimes.
But they don't take you?
Nope. Never been.
I guess from what I understand, there's still a lot of Jaws stuff kicking around, so we should try to get there sometime.
I did look up what an average hotel night in Martha's Vineyard costs, and last I looked, it was $965 a night, so probably not anytime soon.
Well, but who knows? There might be some places that are like $3,000 a night and some places that are regular price.
That's true. That's very true.
Or we could just sleep in our car.
Our child asked us today if I had ever slept in my car. I don't...
What was your answer? I imagine you have.
Just once. And I was 18 and I thought it was a better option than the other options that I had. It was dumb, but
I don't think I ever actually did. I think I've come close. I definitely sleep in a lot of moving cars, but that's not what she's asking.
Right. No, she asked if I had ever spent the night in my car. And I was like, yeah, one time.
What prompted that?
I don't remember. I'm not sure. Maybe because she slept she slept outside while she was at summer camp. So we were talking about that, I think.
Well, this production became famous largely because of all the problems it had. It was originally approximately a 55-day planned schedule, which expanded to 159 shooting days.
Oh.
Whoops. And then, like I said, at the top, budget more than doubled due to repeated mechanical shark failures, the difficulty of filming on the open Atlantic, a screenplay that continued changing during production, and widespread concern that the film might become an expensive disaster. And this chaos is now central to the movie's legend, but the finished film did not succeed merely because things went wrong. The production problems, we've talked about this with lower budget movies, created limitations. So then the filmmakers were forced to make creative choices and decisions, and that all worked out.
Worked out real good.
In the end. So the broken shark created the problem, the filmmakers created the solution. Why Martha's Vineyard, you might ask? They wanted to find Amity Island. God damn it. Sorry. Charlton Heston is now is encroached in my brain.
Great.
The production needed a location that could plausibly represent a prosperous New England resort town, a community financially dependent on summer tourism, and a place with working docks, fishing boats, and beaches. An island that felt geographically and socially contained. So Martha's Vineyard offered all of that. Martha's Vineyard has all the historic New England architecture, the beaches and harbors. Obviously, it's a seasonal tourism economy, but also within that is the working fishing communities. It has several distinctive towns that could be combined into the fictional Amity Island. Some of the areas used on the vineyard were Edgartown, Menemsha, Oak Bluffs, and nearby beaches and coastal waters. And then they also used the local houses, docks, storefronts, and local residents helped to make Amity feel like a genuine community rather than a generic studio town. I want to know, I keep flashing back to that one guy walking out of the thing that looked like a sailor out of a cartoon. He was like an old man, and he like walks up, he gets to the center of frame, but he's like looking off. He has like a pipe.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly worked. It certainly is part of what gives this movie its charm, was the location.
And something that is a technical advantage to Martha's Vineyard that I didn't know about was that the shallow ocean floor extended far offshore in parts of the vineyard, which allowed the production to place boats and equipment far enough from land that the horizon looked open. They could anchor some of their underwater equipment. They could operate the mechanical shark from submerged platforms and also create the illusion that the orca was far out at sea. So in reality, the production could sometimes be operating in relatively shallow water while the camera framed out the shoreline, which is pretty neat. They didn't want to use a tank, which would have made production way easier, but it would have risked visible tank walls. And if you want an example of that, please check out Jaws: The Revenge, Jaws 4, because the reshoot on that ending is in a tank, and you can very clearly see the walls around the tank, and it definitely detracts from the realism. But also, the problem in the tank is more artificial looking water. You can't really get a real looking horizon. All the boat movement's very static, and there's a less convincing sense of isolation. So Spielberg was dedicated to this open sea, real feel, is what I'll call it. It also made nearly every technical problem harder.
You know, it's funny because I'm thinking about right now about how artists can be really stubborn about one particular idea or one particular piece of their artistic vision, and that it can be really hard and it can cause more problems, but in the end, the art wouldn't be what it is without that stubbornness at the center of it. And that perhaps that's why art is pain.
Well, the trouble with this idea, too, is that once you've done pre-production and you've decided you're doing the ocean, there's no turning back.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and I'm thinking of like, small scale personal artistic projects that you and I work on, but like
when you did that Halloween song in like 10/8 time or something.
Like I wasn't thinking about
playing it as a musical piece.
Actually playing it. Yeah. Where you kind of like have this, but that's really easy when it's just you or you and another person. But if you've got all of that, because I was just thinking about how did they find that out about Martha's Vineyard? They were like, we need a place where the ocean floor is really shallow. Like there's no internet where you could or AI to sum up the whole internet for you, right? Like you have to like talk to people that know about oceans.
And I don't know if that was just an advantage that when they were scouting like final places, that
Right.
it was like, oh, by the way, this place has like a lot of shallow water that goes out farther, so that should make things. I don't know how that came
But
about.
that's the thing. It sounds so complicated.
Yeah. Oh, you just wait. They used a lot of the island community. I think there's still some people who are alive. Like one of the kids who is like maybe like Kintner's brother or something like that. Like some of these people still work on the island. They'll like, you can go into a shop and be like, I was in Jaws. So they used numerous vineyard residents to appear as beachgoers, fishermen, town officials, shopkeepers, boat operators, and other extras, which gives Amity scenes an unusual naturalism. You know, some of the performances might be a little less polished, but most of those are in the background, but it's really a lot more realistic. The production also used a lot of local boats and businesses. They had to rely on local boats, docks, properties, tradespeople, marine knowledge. There you go. Because working on a real island meant the production could not operate as if it were on a fully equipped studio lot. They can't just be like, hey, Davey, could you go grab a, purple lamp out of the production design garage or whatever they call it?
That's great.
Thank you. I've worked on lots of movies, if you can't tell.
I can. So clear.
And so materials, personnel, and repairs often had to be coordinated within the island's limited infrastructure, which I didn't think about that, but just all the
That
time.
makes so much sense.
It's
Yeah.
not designed for making movies.
I've not been to Martha's Vineyard, but we've been to islands that you have to take a ferry to, and it's limited. Like, it's a whole big hassle about getting over to the mainland.
Do you know that song by Lamb Chop and Sherry Lewis? This is the song that...
Yeah.
How does it go?
Never ends.
Not according to the internet.
What?
Mandela Effect. It's the song that doesn't end. But I'm just using that as a transition because this is the production that would never leave. The shoot lasted far longer than initially expected, meant hotel arrangements changed, cast and crew remained on the island much longer than planned, local relationships deepened, frustration accumulated, residents saw the production move from exciting novelty to prolonged disruption. So, this extended presence helped make Jaws part of Martha's Vineyard's permanent identity. Joseph Alves Jr. was the production designer and art director. He was central to the film's visual and physical design. His responsibilities included everything from the fictional Amity environment, the orca's practical appearance, the shark concept, construction process. So he really was responsible for head to toe almost of how this film looked and felt in that sense. And in that design, he had to basically communicate two ideas simultaneously. That Amity is a beautiful, welcoming summer destination, but it is also economically fragile and willing to deny danger. So therefore, the town looks bright, clean, seasonal, attractive, commercially dependent on visitors. But the horror comes from ordinary civic self-interest. The business owners need tourists. Politicians need businesses to survive.
Hey, leave my themes alone.
Oh, close your ears. In terms of the orca, Quint's boat needed to feel functional, worn, personal, capable of shark hunting, visually distinctive. But it's important that it's not a sleek adventure vessel. It's not like Hooper's boat that he brings along, when he and Brody go on that night excursion. It looks like a working boat that Quint lives in it half the time, at least, a place modified through experience rather than designed for comfort. And its physical deterioration during the final hunt becomes part of the drama. And I think they had different boat parts. Like they had the full orca, but they also had parts that were designed for braking and stuff like that. I don't know. You might have some of that later, and I'm also not going to get into the special effects of our shark, Bruce. I'm sure everybody out there who knows anything a little bit about Jaws that they called the shark Bruce. It was named after Bruce Raymer, who was Spielberg's lawyer, which is pretty funny.
That is pretty funny.
what I will get into are some of the difficulties that having this mechanical shark caused during the production. The sharks were tested under more controlled conditions before being exposed to the Atlantic Ocean. They were tested in fresh water. These sharks were filmed in salt water. Once they were placed in salt water, the mechanisms faced corrosion, electrical problems, hydraulic leakage, water intrusion, material deterioration, and buoyancy problems. Salt water is far more destructive to complex machinery than controlled fresh water. So that's a large part of the issue here.
Can you imagine being the person that worked on that shark for just like for so long, like so much time, and you worked on it and you like really proud of it, and then nobody thought about salt water, and then you go and it's like, oh well, okay, fine, forget all that I just did for nothing. Like, how frustrating.
This is Bob, our shark guy. He's on top of it. Got to a month later. One of the production's most famous early disasters occurred when the shark was placed into the water and sank. The shark did not arrive as a dependable, ready-to-film movie monster. It immediately became a recovery, repair, and redesign problem. So everything took longer than it was supposed to. The shoot was over 100 days over expectations. The budget was more than double. Here's a quick review of the core problems during production. Number 1, shark was unreliable. Number 2, the ocean could not be controlled. Believe it or not.
Wow.
The horizon betrayed the production. Spielberg wanted clean ocean horizons, no visible land, no modern boats crossing the background. However, tourist boats, sailboats, and other vessels could enter the frame unexpectedly, even if in the distance, you know? A shot could be ruined by a distant boat that had no connection to the production. The boats wouldn't hold their position.
Nowadays, you could just take out those boats in post, right?
Yeah.
But you couldn't do that back then.
No. But they wouldn't shoot this in the ocean now anyway.
But they could. That would be like a good use of computer graphics to like have a more realistic shooting thing.
But instead, they're going to shoot in a tank on green screens like Moana, and that's why the trailers look so terrible. And I love the original. I've only heard bad things. And they're all about the things that I can see in the trailer. Boats would not hold position. They're filming on real boats. Spielberg wanted to be on the ocean. The problem with boats...
One thing.
The boats move. Even when each was correctly positioned initially, current and wind pull them apart. This led to continuity becoming extremely difficult. A scene could begin in sunlight and calm water, but then might have to continue hours or days later until the clouds moved or there was, if the water was rougher, they'd have to wait for it to calm down, or if there was a different tide.
Oh man, the continuity person's job must have sucked.
Yeah.
They had to keep track of so many variables.
And I think some of that's up to Verna Fields too. The crew and cast became seasick. The production sound was compromised. The wind, engines, and water made clean dialogue recording extremely difficult. So this increased dependence on ADR, which is additional dialogue replacement, sound editing, and post-production reconstruction. And like I mentioned, the schedule kept expanding. Each delay created further delays. Repairs consumed shooting time. Then the weather changed while the repairs were made. Completed setups had to be rebuilt. Cast availability became more difficult, and Universal's costs continued rising. Along with that, so did Spielberg's fear. He's repeatedly described the shoot as deeply traumatic. He feared being fired, that the movie would fail, and that he'd never be trusted again with another major film. So, the production that later established him as a major filmmaker felt, while underway, like it might end his career. And I think that's a good lesson, like, all joking aside.
Yeah.
Like, anybody who starts a new job that seems overwhelming, like, you can get through it. That's our inspirational message of the day. We're open mic Night of the Living Dead, and we're telling you just to keep on trucking. And I just winked and imagined like a little sound effect going with it, like a ding. But you can't see me. This is audio only. Now, due to all of these problems, crew members reportedly began nicknaming the production Flaws.
Shut up.
I'm not joking. This joke reflected their frustration, exhaustion, and skepticism about whether the movie could be completed successfully. This didn't mean that everybody hated Spielberg. It's better understood as a morale humor arising from a notoriously difficult shoot. There's also a common myth. It's crazy because I've seen this go both ways, this argument, so I'm not sure on this. But a common myth says Spielberg always planned to conceal the shark for most of the movie. But it sounds like, so that's not fully accurate. The production originally intended to use the shark more extensively, and mechanical failures forced Spielberg to redesign sequences around its absence.
That's what I saw more consistently, like he said in some of the documentaries.
Yeah, because sometimes you'll hear people say it the other way around, that everybody thinks that they didn't show the shark in Jaws because of all the mechanical problems, but it was really his plan all along. No,
he couldn't use the shark and had to figure out how to make it scary, so he went back and looked at Hitchcock. Did you see that?
No.
Yeah, he said specifically that he went back to Hitchcock where it was like show less. The less that you show, the scarier it is. So that and that was in direct response to not being able to use the sharks.
Well, that's why the yellow barrels were important. Mm-hmm. They serve several functions. They make the unseen shark visible through its effects. They indicate speed and direction and demonstrate the shark's strength. And they maintain suspense when the mechanical shark cannot be shown. So they're not merely props. They become a visual performance of the shark. Another interesting thing, at least I've heard, but one of Spielberg's trademarks is to show somebody, a character's reaction to something and like sit on that for a minute before he shows you what they're reacting to. So this film often cuts to Brody, Hooper, Quint, or swimmers, beachgoers, and their reactions instead of showing the shark directly. So the fear is communicated through those reactions and the human behavior. Another good example of that in another movie is when the people first are shown the dinosaurs in Jaws, because not Jaws.
You mean Jurassic Park?
Jurassic Jaws.
Uh-huh.
I bet somebody's made that. Yes, in Jurassic Park, when they're first witnessing the dinosaurs, you see their huge reactions on their faces before they show you the dinosaurs. But this happens in Indiana Jones, all of them. Next time you're watching Spielberg, just count the amount of times you see somebody's reaction before you see what they're reacting to. That's your homework, listeners. And of course, editorial restraint. Verna Fields could use the shortage of usable shark footage as an advantage, like you were saying. So, the shark's failure did not save the movie by itself. It forced Spielberg, Fields, John Williams, Bill Butler, the cinematographer, and the sound team to invent a more suspenseful movie. Let's maybe wrap things up here.
Okay.
I'll kind of open the second part with a few more interesting production challenges.
Okay, cool.
And then we'll get into vibe check.
Awesome.
Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Yeah. So tomorrow I'll do a little bit more on production.
Tomorrow? You mean next week?
Yes.
Next week.
Next week.
Next week.
I'm not going to lie. We might do some of this tomorrow, but you're going to hear it a week later. Secret's out. Nobody else does that, records in advance.
No. Or in pieces. Takes breaks.
So I've got no wheels to spin.
Right. No wheels to spin. It's been so long.
Soon. We'll spin soon.
We will. Either next week or the week after, depending on how much more stuff we have.
Absolutely.
You can find us on the internet if you haven't found us yet. OMNLD Pod on your favorite social media site /app. Please reach out. Share this with folks you know. You can follow me on Letterboxd. I'm Chill Out Barbara. Barbara's spelled Barbra because that's how she spells it in the movie.
What movie?
Night of the Living Dead. I had to stop myself from saying open mic Night of the Living Dead because I say it so often. But yeah, my screen name on the internet these days is Chill Out Barbara. because Barbara in Night of the Living Dead does not chill out, and I spend most of my time watching that movie reminding her to. So if you're looking for me individually, you can find me there. But you can also find us, OMNLD Pod. We make some videos. We put some stuff out, some pictures sometimes. You know.
Like internet things.
Internet things. Exactly. Thanks for hanging out with us. Welcome to the second year at the open mic. We're glad you're here.
Yeah, we're starting off with a doozy. If this is your first episode ever, a lot of our deep dives are just one episode.
Yeah, there's just so much to cover with this film, and we really wanted to give it a good go.
Yeah, because we only plan to do each of these movies one time, so might as well do it right the first time, right, Spielberg?
Right.
Just like he crafted his film, we're crafting our episode.
Yeah, we are.
With less salt water.
Thank goodness, because we haven't really gotten into it yet, but I do not like the ocean.
Oh, yeah. Maybe we can open with that tomorrow and then get into production.
That makes sense.
I mean,
I was gonna say, I was thinking maybe like vibe check. It would, because it's like about the vibes, but we could definitely we could open with that, but we'll get there. I promise. Stick around and you'll hear why I think I don't like this movie as much as John. It's the ocean. Okay, cool. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
See ya.